I watched and told you all to watch the only Kiyoshi Kurosawa movie I've ever seen, Cure, because as listeners of this podcast know, I don't like horror movies. But
Really?
no, don't like them. Let me be a little more clear. And Jake is helping me get into this more. I don't like gore, so I'm not going to watch a Hostel movie ever. Jake and I were talking.
You don't like gore, and yet Cure was.
Well, I actually didn't find Cure to be super gory.
In terms of like, there is one shot where I was like, "Holy mother!"
I was warned about that shot, just like in description of like skin peeling. So
the one scene my wife walked in on was that moment too.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to watch that one at night for fear that my wife might wake up. I feel like the genre tag on Letterboxd and IMDb and Wikipedia and everywhere needs to be a little bit more specific about what is like a horror movie in the tradition of horror movies, like Saw. I mean, maybe I'm just talking about torture porn as something I don't want to watch. But Cure, for me, falls much more into the like mystery thriller genre, like Seven or Zodiac. Like these movies that are scary, but not designed to make you terrified. Even movies like, we talked about Ari Aster movies earlier because I love Midsommar. And I think Hereditary is pretty great too. Those, I don't know, maybe there's something about if the story is strong enough, I can handle the terror. Also, I think a movie like Shiva Baby is way scarier than a movie like Cure.
I always say that Shiva Baby is a comedy directed like a horror movie, so I'm glad you mentioned that.
I agree though too, because I was reading a little bit on Cure, and I saw it compared to like The Grudge, where I'm like, those movies don't feel similar at all to me. Like they seem like they're not in the same genre.
Well, they're just both movies that are Japanese.
Yeah, but they were like horror movies. It was saying like it's similar to other horror movies like The Grudge. Like, no, it's not. I don't think so at all.
Well, here, and this is like a good origin story. So I saw The Ring my freshman year of college. Jake, you might remember Megan. We went to her dorm room after the movie, and the light in her dorm room was very green, and I just like couldn't sleep. I was like, it's too much like the motifs from the movie. I hate this. And so I just like didn't watch horror movies for years. Anyway, I'm trying to get back into it a little bit. And while I don't want to watch any like Takeshi Miike movies, like Audition or Ichi the Killer, that stuff seems a little not up my alley. Cure seemed very much up my alley. For one thing, I absolutely loved Perfect Days, and we've talked about Tom Popo on this podcast. So Kōji Yakusho as the star of this movie, I'm in already. And then Kiyoshi Kurosawa is considered a great director, insanely prolific. I think he's made 26 movies since Cure came out in 1997.
Jeez.
Or something like that. Just an absurd amount of movies. And this is in the Letterboxd Top 250. So that also piqued my curiosity because I'm Letterboxd broken. And I had a feeling y'all would like it. So did you like this movie about hypnotism and murder?
I was really glad that this was the option. In fact, Cure is the reason I chose 1997. It has been on my watch list for forever. I've almost bought the 4K Criterion disc like 5 times, and I love Pulse from Kiyoshi Kurosawa. And in terms of like dread and vibe, if you like Cure, you have to check out Pulse. Definitely not a gory movie. And that same, like, the thing about these movies, Kurosawa, at least these two movies that I can kind of connect, is that nowhere feels safe. Like every scene in both of these films feels like the worst place on earth in that moment. And as a horror fan myself, I really love the way that he directs this film. That does give you that just overwhelming sense of dread from basically the beginning right until the very end, particularly until the end. There's this tension of, you could be in a room full of cops. The interrogation scene, I was on edge thinking, okay, so what is he going to hypnotize everybody in this room? Like, you just never can get safe in this film. And that's one of kind of those main themes, is that this doesn't have a cure. This psychosis, this whatever it is. What's really interesting is, after I watched this, I was doing a little bit of research. Cure was not the original title for this. I don't know if you're aware. It was called Evangelist, and then they changed it because they didn't want it to sound like it was going to be like a religious horror movie.
Well, there had been a series of murders in Japan around that time based that were being connected to, I don't want to call it a cult because I don't know enough about it, but yeah, they didn't
some kind
want
of like religious,
association.
cultish something. Yeah. So they were like, okay, well, we'll just call it Cure. But I do think that knowing that it was called Evangelist is so interesting because there is this kind of like, I don't know if you guys picked up on this, but I feel this kind of underlying, we're preparing for the end of days type thing. He talks about kind of like, I hope I'm not misremembering here, but like he kind of like talks about like preparation and preparing for something. And you can also, in that final scene, it is kind of like he is not the only one, because that one woman walks up to the waitress, whispers in her ear, and now she's going and grabbing a knife. So it's kind of like this thing that is now infesting Japan.
That's an interesting take, and not how I took the ending, but we got to the same place regardless, because there are other places in the movie where it seems absolutely like other people are doing this.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, talk about some of those.
So let's talk about the plot a little bit, and then Jake, I definitely want to hear what you thought. But although I did read your Letterboxd review, so relieved that you liked it.
Yeah.
So this movie is about a detective who's on the case of a series of murders that seem completely unconnected. They're finding the killers right away. People are being killed, and then an X is being carved into their chest or throat. The killers are found right away. They all say they wanted to do it, but none of them had any intention or any record. None of them were criminals beforehand or seemed mentally disturbed beforehand. And a psychologist who's also on the case keeps suggesting that the devil made them do it. And he's saying it as a joke, maybe. But then eventually we find that there is a person connected to all of these crimes. He's caught fairly early in the movie, which is an amazing bit of structuring. Then it becomes not even a war of wits, because the detective, whose name I can't, do either of you remember his name?
Takabe?
Okay, so yeah. Takabe seems immediately to be completely outmatched.
He has zero chance throughout this movie.
At the same time, Takabe is dealing with, his wife is schizophrenic, and we find that out. And here's where this sort of infection everywhere seems to be happening. The first scene is Takabe's wife seeing a doctor, and the doctor's taking notes in German, not Japanese, and it says schizophrenic in the notes. That's the only reason I was even able to catch that, was because it was in English characters. I can't read Japanese at all. I can't read German, but I can see what's schizophrenic. And then throughout the movie, Takabe talks about how he has to take care of his wife, and it's a problem for him. Or he's sort of tricked or hypnotized into admitting that. The way that this doctor is shot is always from the front, as if we, the audience, are looking into his eyes, suggesting to me that whoever he was talking to was being influenced or mesmerized by him. It was another way of mesmerizing. The villain, I guess you could call him a villain, he's not actively doing much. Mamiya, right? I think Mamiya.
Yeah. Do you really say he's not actively doing much? Because he's definitely doing stuff.
I use the word actively specifically.
He's not the one murdering.
He's not murdering. He doesn't raise a hand to kill anyone.
It's definitely doing something.
But the way that he mesmerizes people or convinces these people to do these things are all different. And I read or listened to a really interesting interview with Kurosawa where he talked about how it's so funny. He's so humble. He talked about how when he started the movie, he wanted to make the lighter be the trigger for the hypnotism in every scene. But it didn't always make sense. Like in the scene where the doctor is hypnotized, this female doctor, which I think is the best scene in the movie and the scariest scene in the movie for me by far. I like gasped twice. He uses water. The reason he uses water is because it was a no smoking building and they couldn't light a lighter.
That's funny.
But then it created this amazing thing where it was like what you said earlier, Brandon, that there's nowhere safe, where any element, even the weather, is working for Mamiya. Like the scene where it seems as if the scene where he's finally gotten Takabe has lit a lighter to try to get a mental edge up on Mamiya, and then it starts pouring rain, and that takes out the lighter, and then those drips have Takabe completely mesmerized. That happened by accident, maybe, because he wasn't able to light a lighter in one scene because it was a no smoking room. It's incredible. I don't know like what's apocryphal or what's real. You know, some of these interviews that he's given are 20 years later, but I just love that idea that he became a more mature director on the spot because he had to. Anyway, Jake, What'd you think of Cure?
He had to solve problems, man. You know, some of the best things come out of, you know, having to solve problems on the spot. And I liked this movie so much. I'm so glad you recommended it. A lot of the movies on our list, you know, I'll look at and I'll be like, oh yes, I'm glad that's on there. I know this movie. I should have seen that by now. You know, whatever. They're movies I know, but I really didn't know this movie at all. I hadn't really heard about it, which is a little embarrassing to admit, but I feel like I'm amongst friends here. I can do this. So I was, you know, excited to kind of have something that I didn't really know anything about. And I've talked about this before too, but like I don't watch trailers, I don't read anything about it. Like, and even with this movie, it's like I don't want to read anything about it before, you know, watching it for the podcast. I didn't want to know what it was about. Like I knew the guy from Perfect Days was in it. I also loved Perfect Days. Really liked Tampopo a lot. So that was it. That was enough for me to know. Going through this movie completely blind was such a cool experience. And I wrote in my Letterboxd review that at the end of the movie, I literally rewound it about 4 or 5 minutes probably to watch like those last 4 or 5 minutes again, just to kind of make sure I absorbed everything that happened. What I didn't put in my Letterboxd review is that was not the only time I did that, where I had to stop the movie and be like, wait a minute, and go back like a couple of minutes and be like, is that actually okay? Did I see what I think I just saw? And be like, okay, yes, I did. So I probably saw this movie like 1 1/4 times, maybe 1 1/3. You know, I watched a lot of it over again, which I don't remember if I've ever done it to the extent that I did it with this movie, because it's so precise and it's so direct. And like I said, if he was coming up with some of the stuff by accident, it definitely doesn't feel that way at all. It feels like the most like precise and deliberate, like procedural mind game type of movie. And what's the bad guy's name? Mamiya is one of the scariest villains. And he said he doesn't do much actively, but what he can do, you know, what he can do just with his mind and everything else is just, you're just on edge for the entire movie. It's a pucker movie for sure. It's just, you know, and yeah, there's not like a ton of violence in it, but you never know, like, is someone going to come out, you know, in the next scene? Are you going to see the X's, you know, in the next scene? You never know, like, kind of when it's going to come up again. This is a great movie.
You mentioned like precision, and it doesn't feel like there's anything that's in there that feels accidental. I watched, so on Criterion Channel, they have kind of these like extra things. One of them was a video essay about Cure.
It's so good, by the guy who made Lynch Oz. Incredible.
Yes. Yeah. So I watched that earlier today in prep. I was like, okay, maybe I'll be able to glean a couple things from this that I could bring to the table. And one thing that really stood out to me is he mentions the scene at the dry cleaners and how he's like, why does he have this scene? Why do we have this scene where it's like we're focusing on this other character that we're never going to see again, and he just kind of disappears, and we keep going outside of this dry cleaner, and then we go back inside, and we come back out of it. And he talked about the rhythm of the cuts going back and forth, and that every time we go out, there is a metronome on the left side of the screen that's goes. And I didn't even notice it until he pointed it out. But he was like, in that scene, Kurosawa is using the pacing of the cuts and the pacing of this metronome to like hypnotize the audience themselves. I was like, dude, that's crazy. That's great stuff.
The other piece from that essay that I didn't recognize, and I actually still don't really know how to digest it, was the scene where the cop, when he's being interrogated after shooting his partner, he says to turn up the volume and hear the dryer that causes maybe the actual murder of Takabe's wife. You can hear it in that room. And they ask, so where are we right now? We're not in this interrogation room. We're in Takabe's house. If that's the case, the movie is, then I don't know what the movie is.
That same part too, I was like, I had the exact same thought. It's like, so what does that even mean? You know?
And I love that. I love the idea that, first off, Jake, you mentioned, I watched the whole movie again immediately right after I finished it, because I didn't feel like I got it. First, and the thing that got me was, and I still don't get this part, like, I don't know how Fumi died. I don't know who killed her. I assume it was Takabe, but I don't know. I don't know that you're supposed to know.
I think that it's alluded to, and I think the essay actually kind of mentions this.
So they do, but I don't know if I buy his explanation.
So yeah. So let me explain the explanation, because I think I'm with you.
I didn't watch it.
So the explanation is that when in that final scene, which is the most pulse scene in this movie, where he sees the person behind the shower curtain, and my heart sank like a brick. I was like, oh my gosh, what is that? And he, opens up that curtain very, very slowly, and instead it's a picture. The explanation, or at least the supposition from this film essayist, which again I don't know if I agree, but I like the thought, is that the picture then hypnotizes him, and what we're getting is a kind of like an association to Psycho, that shower curtain is supposed to kind of like subliminally message that instead of Norma Bates, or it's now him, that then he goes and takes this knife and then murders his wife. I don't know if like you said, Brad, I don't know if I agree with that, but it's such an interesting, and there's this unknowable nature to this movie that makes it almost thematically tied to The Sweet Hereafter, where both of these movies are about death and about, what causes it, and also trying to understand that death. And there is no understanding it. It's impossible. And I think that both these films feel somewhat unknowable because of that. And I think that that's genius. Both of you, tip of the cap for picking both of these movies that have this kind of subliminal connection.
Well, wait, this is wild because I didn't even take away the same takeaway from the essay that you did.
What did you get from the essay?
I got that when he got into the argument with his wife about the silent argument with his wife about the dryer, and then you see him reach for a knife, and then it cuts away. The essayist says, and look, I could have interpreted this wrong. The essayist says, from here on out, the shots are much more dreamlike. There's those shots in the back of the bus that look like they're also a gondola. Not a gondola. Is that what they're called?
No,
we have one here in New York.
Yeah,
the sky, the things in the sky.
Well, it's almost like it's all clouds
behind
them.
I was like,
they're in the sky. Very dreamlike.
Is this a sky tram?
Yeah.
Like, what are they riding?
Right.
Yeah.
But it's a bus, right? It's the back of a bus. In fact, it looks just like the shot of the back of the bus from The Sweet Hereafter. I mean, there's quite a few images that are similar, but there's so much more that's dreamy after he touches that knife. And what I took him saying was nothing after the knife was real until we saw Fumi dead, because she'd been rotting for some time. So everything between here and then was just in his mind.
Where she's like attached to that like upright gurney coming down that hallway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I didn't buy that either, because then the interrogation room didn't happen. Then committing her didn't happen. The whole thing at the wherever the warehouse where the photo behind the shower curtain is and where Mamiya dies, then none of that happened. And that's possible, but I find that a little bit less satisfying. But I love that you can take it a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, I think that we're talking about the same thing. I'm talking about the first half when he had tied the shower curtain piece to him touching the knife. And you're talking about from him touching the knife after that, because he says he then was like, then it goes into this dreamlike state. And I believe what he said was something to the effect of like, the shower curtain plus the dreamlike way that everything's edited is designed for us to connect the dots of Norman Bates, knife, she's dead, he must have done it. It was kind of the idea floated out there. But yeah, dude, that's fun stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking about it in terms of Hereditary and Tar. These are three movies where you can interpret them to be either supernatural or not. And I have a preference for each, but nothing makes them more fun than the fact that it works both ways. Like, I think Tar is much more fun as a ghost story. I think Hereditary is much more fun as not a ghost story. I think Cure as a ghost story is one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, because it is saying that like this is a mind virus that is now out. And I just think that's incredible. And so I will definitely be watching Pulse, but I'm also really curious about, I get into these modes where I watch like a ton of movies by a Japanese director I found. So like I sat through Happy Hour last year after Drive My Car, and I sat through The Funeral and many other Juzo Itami movies after Tampopo. And I'll be doing that with Kiyoshi Kurosawa for sure.
Have you seen, sorry, there's like a slight tangent, but have you seen Evil Does Not Exist?
Yeah.
What'd you think of that one?
Still thinking about it. What did I say? There was one thought that made me feel better about the ending.
Sorry, I brought this up because you mentioned Drive My Car and Ryusuke Hamaguchi popped in my mind. So
two things about Hamaguchi. First off, I had seen a video of a crab taking a baby turtle off the beach as it was walking to the water. And it sparked a conversation on Twitter, of all places, about whether it was moral or not that the videographer just let that happen. And in a lot of places, it's illegal to stop that from happening. And that conversation did a lot for me in terms of thinking about the ending to Evil Does Not Exist.
That is so dope. I love that. Because I really liked that movie. That's one that I think I'm definitely going to be revisiting by the end of the year, because it's like the more that I've gotten away from it, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, oh man, that could be like a top 5 for me for the year so far.
It's awesome. Have you seen Happy Hour?
No.
So do.
Okay.
It's 4 hours, and it's much
Happy
more.
Hours.
It's got much more in common with Evil Does Not Exist than it does with Drive My Car.
Oh, cool. It's already on my watch list. Perfect.
Great. And a lot of it's just like there's a city hall scene in Evil Does Not Exist. Not a city hall, a convening of the city, of the small town. And a lot of Happy Hour is just like people in rooms like that talking, and you see the whole meeting, which is very cool.
Yeah. Very similar. Drive My Car does the same thing too. He likes to kind of like build up his themes with that.
The reason I'm really glad you brought this up is Ryusuke Hamaguchi is a protege of Kiyoshi Kurosawa. He was his student, and now they appear together all the time.
They have an interview thing on Criterion.
Not that interesting, but
okay, good. It's pretty long, so I didn't watch it.
Yeah. It's interesting just to watch like their demeanor with each other. I mean, you would like it, Jake. You would like it because now you like both directors. But I think the content of it isn't as interesting as just watching Hamaguchi, who, in general, he's a bit awkward. He's actually in Happy Hour, and from when I saw him there, I'm like, that's a weird dude. That's an awkward guy. The interview between him and Kurosawa hammers that home. But that's the thing that's most interesting. It's just, as a fan of both of them, it's cool to watch them interact with each other. But beyond that, there's not a ton, except that if you watch, so the Criterion has that, and it also has an interview with Kurosawa from around the time of the movie's release, I think maybe in 2000. And just the way he thinks about the movie is quite a bit different after the 20 years have passed. He still loves it, but his memory is much worse in 2020, I think, is when that came out, the second interview. And he just seems much more humble now than he did back then. He was like a guy on the rise back then, and he's much more down to earth now. Any other thoughts, either of you, about this movie?
If you have not seen Cure and somehow you listened through this whole conversation about it, definitely go check it out. It is if you are a horror fan, I like how you mentioned kind of movies like Seven and Zodiac, because it very much falls kind of in that line of film. And Silence of the Lambs, where it's like much more about this kind of like a creepy, foreboding, dreadful serial killer stuff going on.
Yeah, it's more of a vibe movie than anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll watch a scary vibe movie all day. I just don't want to see guts.
There, that's a letterbox list asking to be made right there.
Yeah, for sure.